During the past decade, there have been many major scandals involving doctors who have molested both male and female patients at colleges and universities. At the University of Southern California, Dr. Tyndall; at UCLA, Dr. Heaps; at the University of Michigan, Dr. Anderson; and at Ohio State University, Dr. Strauss. There are also major cases ongoing that involve doctors who have molested hundreds of children in clinics. And in Pennsylvania, Dr. Johnnie Barto. The Roman Catholic Church, the military, the Boy Scouts, colleges, and universities, they all have withered under the spotlight of sexual misconduct scandals and promised that abuse will no longer be swept under the carpet. The medical profession, however, has never taken on sexual misconduct as a significant priority, and layer upon layer of secrecy makes it nearly impossible for the public or even the medical community itself to know the extent of physician sexual abuse. In a national investigation, the Justice in America network TV series staff examined documents that describe disturbing acts of physician sexual abuse in every state. Rapes by OB/GYNs, seductions by psychiatrists, fondling by anesthesiologists and ophthalmologists, and molestations by pediatricians and radiologists. Some doctors were disciplined over a single episode of sexual misconduct. A few physicians with hundreds of victims are among the nation's worst sex offenders. But the toll can't be measured by numbers alone. For patients, the violations can be life-altering. The betrayal even pushed some to suicide. How do doctors get away with exploiting patients for years? Because some victims say nothing. Intimidated, confused, or embarrassed, they fear that no one will take their word over a doctor's. Colleagues and nurses stay silent. Hospitals and healthcare organizations brush off accusations or quietly push doctors out, the investigation found, without reporting them to police or licensing agencies. Society condemns sexual misconduct by most citizens and demands punishment. But when a physician is the perpetrator, the nation often looks the other way. Physician-dominated medical boards give offenders second chances. Prosecutors dismissed or reduced charges so doctors could keep practicing and stay off sex offender registries. Communities rallied around them. The medical profession has never taken on sexual misconduct as a significant priority. Over and over again, records show predatory physicians took advantage of a doctor's special privilege, the daily practice of asking trusting people to disrobe in a private room and permit themselves to be touched. Sexual conduct between a doctor and a patient, even if ostensibly consensual, is strictly forbidden. In ethical terms, it's a never event. In a legal sense, it can be a crime. Physicians know it's a line that can't be crossed. Its prohibition is as old as the Hippocratic Oath. Only 11 states have a law requiring medical authorities to report to police or prosecutors when they suspect a sexual crime has been committed against an adult. Secrecy is the enemy, and that enemy is at work today when it comes to abusive doctors. It takes dedicated lawyers like Manley, Stewart, and Finaldi to hold them accountable and obtain compensation for their victims. They will discuss a broken system that forgives sexually abusive doctors in every state, why a national tracking system doesn't show the extent of physician sexual misconduct, why sexual misconduct is difficult to uncover, how predatory physicians get away with their crimes, what constitutes a sexual assault, how often do medical professionals commit acts of sexual assault against patients, who is liable if you are sexually assaulted by a doctor, what you should do if you were sexually assaulted by your doctor, and other relevant and important issues. In this insider exclusive Justice in America Network TV special, Justice in America, America's Predator Doctors Crisis, Our news team is on location with John Manley, founder and partner at Manley, Stewart and Finaldi, and Morgan Stewart, partner, and Courtney Thom, as well as some of their clients, to discuss these issues. Manley, Stewart and Finaldi is the nation's leading firm representing patients sexually assaulted by doctors. They have recovered nearly $2.5 billion in compensation for patients since 2018. They have served or are serving as lead counsel in these cases. Dozens of officials at the USAG, the USOC, and MSU resigned under pressure or were fired. Some faced criminal charges, though few were convicted. The scandal led to the Protecting Young Victims from Sexual Abuse. In 2018, MSU agreed to pay $500 million to settle lawsuits accusing university leaders, including its president and athletic director, of enabling Nassar's abuse. In 2021, the USOPC and the USAG settled lawsuits brought by more than 500 athletes for $380 million. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Orange County, California. It is my great pleasure to introduce John Manley and Morgan Stewart to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve.
Tell our audience, John, and I've known you for many, many years, but tell our audience a little bit about your firm. What's your primary practice?
So our firm, Manley, Stewart and Finaldi, specializes in childhood sexual abuse and adult sexual abuse. So what we do is we represent victims and survivors of sexual abuse, ranging from small children all the way to adults who are sexually assaulted. Mm-hmm. And we've been doing that work since 1997.
Right, and you've had cases, Morgan, that span schools, churches, the Boy Scouts, the whole 9 yards, the Olympics, right? What do you find the toughest part to prosecuting these cases?
The emotional aspect. I mean, it's tangible and real to victims of, you're not just dealing with corporations, you're dealing with people's lives, and that's probably the toughest part of litigating the cases. There are still people, John, that don't want to come forward after they've been sexually abused because they're shamed, right? How do you deal with that? How do you convince somebody that they should get justice?
I don't want to try to convince anybody to do this. What I want to do is give them their options, and if filing a lawsuit to hold their perpetrator and the institutions that enabled them accountable is part of that process, we're happy to do it. What I say to clients is, and I think the perception is by a lot of people that lawyers and clients in these cases are just chasing money. That's not what we do. And I tell our clients, look, what you want to chase is healing. A jury can smell in 2 seconds if your goal is money. For the vast majority of our clients, they want some kind of accountability and justice. And by doing that, in a way, it can be very healing. Forcing your perpetrator to sit across the table from you, or even on a Zoom, and having a lawyer ask the serious questions that need to be asked, can be very empowering and very healing. And the reality is that when this happens to you as a child or as an adult, it's essentially emotional murder. It affects you for the rest of your life. So we want to be a part of that process to bring accountability and healing, by what we do. And I think I'm proud to say we're exceptionally good at it.
As you both know, I've done a lot of cases, different practices, and I remember 15 years ago when we first met, I realized that to you, this is a mission. So I remember when I was interviewing the folks at the Innocence Project, and I was asking them, how much longer are you going to do this? My question to you is, you'll do it forever, won't you?
Yeah, sadly, I think Morgan and I and others in the firm all agree that we could do this forever because there's no shortage of it. And what I've discovered doing this over the last 30 years is this is a no bullshit public health problem. We have a serious problem in this country with adults abusing children. It's in institutions. And frankly, the laws and the courts haven't dealt with it appropriately. And I think a lot of if you go to prisons, if you look at homelessness, if you look at a lot of the social ills that plague this country, what you're going to find is a huge majority of those people were sexually assaulted as children.
It's a public health problem. Okay, what's the solution?
Well, I think the answer is, number one is, for example, teachers. Teachers get a background check when they're hired, and then no one looks at them again. The number of public school teachers that are being arrested for this across the country is staggering. When I started doing these cases, if you'd have told me that we have districts where we have not a few, but dozens of perpetrators in public schools, I would have been shocked. It's commonplace for people to believe that if you prove somebody abused somebody, then you win. That's not what it is. That's not the way it works. In order to show liability, also known as civil guilt, of a school district or an institution that harbors a pedophile, you have to show either negligence or they knew or should have known that this person was abusing children. In every one of these cases that we try or settle, we've proved that there was knowledge, that the institution knew and hid it.
And that's a big question I want to ask you. Proved. How? Because oftentimes complaints will be issued, correct? Mm-hmm. And somebody will have a forgetful memory. I don't remember that. Or they won't investigate it. How do you prove it?
Number one, you prove frequently the survivor themselves reports. Mm-hmm. So if the survivor reports, that's enough. But oftentimes it's the documents. I mean, you'd be stunned at how often there's a report to a principal, a vice principal, another teacher, all of whom...
All documented,
all in their documents, and they do nothing. They're all mandatory reporters under the law.
Now, we've talked about what the administrators should do. Let's talk about some of the clients that you've represented. After you settle a case, win a case, do you keep in contact? Do they keep in contact with you?
I keep in contact with clients going back 10, 15 years.
The other question is, no matter how much money someone gets, they still may be troubled. You and I have talked about this many times. They may have dysfunctional relationship with other people throughout their life. Yeah. They may become addicts, using alcohol. How do you deal with that?
What makes us different is that, we're not car crash lawyers. We're not product liability lawyers. We're not business lawyers. This is all we do. The law in this area is complex, and I think largely because of some of our larger settlements, we've seen a lot of other lawyers who do all kinds of various other things market themselves as sexual abuse lawyers. And they're free to do that. The problem with that is that, number one, you don't understand the law. Number two, you can't bring a client and go, well, what did he do to you? Did he rape you? You don't do that. This is, what happened to these people is incredibly traumatic, and you want to be very careful how you speak to them. You want them to hopefully only have to tell their story once. And you don't want this process to re-traumatize them. So, we struggle very hard to make sure that the client gets the help they need, both in the process and afterwards. The whole point of the money is to get them the help they need to recover their humanity. What most people don't really appreciate is, and I say it all the time, sexuality is part of our humanity. It's the way we express love. And when you take somebody's ability away to love, it's profound. And so we're very conscious of that. And this is, for us, this is not just another case. It's our vocation. It's what we do. And everybody in this firm, to a person, believes in our mission.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Courtney Thom to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Courtney, you have an amazing background, which brings you to this firm, right? Tell our audience a little bit about your background.
Yes, thank you. So I was with the Orange County District Attorney's Office for over a decade, predominantly during that decade's span as a prosecutor, handling some of the most heinous sex crimes cases in Orange County. I have over 50 criminal trials that range from child pornography, child molestation, up to very violent rape. So I have a lot of experience, fortunately and unfortunately, handling and walking children and women through criminal prosecution of unthinkable crimes.
And what made you decide to leave the prosecutor's office and come to private practice?
I loved being a prosecutor. I loved the work. I loved helping the voiceless. And I had seen mainly Stewart and Finaldi help survivors who were navigating both the civil process and parallel criminal process. You see, in a number of sexual abuse cases, the path to justice is twofold. It's civil justice and criminal justice. And in California, one of our amazing laws that had been evolved over time to help victims out is Marsy's Law. And Marsy's Law is part of the California Constitution, and what that enables attorneys to do is represent survivors of crime. And John and his team of attorneys here have done amazing work in that field, that they walk survivors through the civil process, and it doesn't end there. They also walk survivors through the criminal process. And in their work in both fields, I really respected the way they did that. And at a certain point in my career, after prosecuting countless criminal cases, I decided to broaden my skill set and join the team.
We're here today, and you're on this show today because you're handling, along with John, 2 horrific cases, one dealing with a doctor in Oregon, Dr. Farley, and another one in Pennsylvania, Dr. Johnnie Barto. Can you tell our audience a little bit about both of these cases?
Unfortunately, sexual abuse by physicians is a nationwide problem. You know, by and large, the majority of physicians do not sexually abuse their patients. They do the work that they went to medical school, that they took the Hippocratic Oath for, to never harm a patient. Unfortunately, in these 2 cases, these 2 physicians decided not to do that from a very early stage in their careers as physicians. So when people would go to both of these physicians to cure illnesses, to make sure that they were healthy, unfortunately, both Dr. Johnnie Barto and David Farley took that very vulnerable position of their patients and used that trust, manipulated that trust for their own sexual desires. Their abuse is heinous. I think Dr. Johnnie Barto is probably one of the most prolific sexual abusers when it comes to physicians that we've seen.
Yeah, you see the same thing with medical malpractice cases, and I've been reading that one of the reasons they overlook this is because there's a shortage of doctors.
Yeah.
And I even read a case where somebody who had been convicted or lost their license, for private practice, went to work for the federal government as a doctor.
Yeah.
I've seen those cases too. Where are you in the civil case against Barto? There's a criminal conviction, so why isn't this case rushing towards settlement?
We represent over 150 women and children, and these cases take time in discovery, in revealing, leaving no stone unturned in regard. We know how he did it.
Yeah.
But these things don't happen. This abuse by physicians doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah, let me interrupt you here for a second, because you said you represent 150 people. He pled guilty to only 2 counts.
Correct.
Why didn't
He pled no look.
So why doesn't the district attorney include these other cases?
It's a very small county. It's Cambria County. It's Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And he got a huge sentence. And I think there's 2 reasons. I thought the DA there did an excellent job. Yeah. It was a quick prosecution. He got 84 years. He's in his mid-70s. And I think that the feeling is there's no point because he's already in prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah, let me ask you this question. I remember a case I did in Sacramento where 2 cardiac surgeons performed 698 unnecessary heart operations on senior citizens. Well, they couldn't, the civil case would have been medical malpractice caps, but they went after them for fraud. The U.S. Attorney's Office. Because the district attorney isn't doing anything, is there any way that the U.S. Attorney's Office can go after this doctor?
Well, we've done one better than that. The Oregon Attorney General's office is investigating it. We went to them. They've undertaken an investigation, and they haven't rendered a decision yet. We're very hopeful they'll indict him. And if that doesn't work, we'll go to the U.S. Attorney. You know, David Farley, you know, he's accused of abusing children. Now, you would think you resign your medical license, you'd want to stay away from children. He got himself a job in an elementary school. We found out about it and alerted the authorities as a teacher's aide or something like that.
They hired him?
Yeah, they did because he doesn't have a criminal. If you do a criminal background check, it's clean.
Okay, well, we wish you much success with this case. We'll be following it closely. And thank you very much for being on the show, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.